Hello, welcome to our channel. Hello. There are some people who always seem to be managing something. They smile, but it's not genuine. They talk, but without really expressing themselves. They try to rest, but even when they do, they can't find peace. Because their minds just won't stop anymore. They move from one thing to another without ever really letting go. They're one person on their way to work, and someone else entirely when they come home. And without realizing it, they forget their own voice. Maybe the mind can no longer be itself. How does this happen?
There's a situation like this in what you're talking about. You said, for example, that this part was important to you. There's someone else at work and someone else somewhere else. So clearly, these people are never able to truly be themselves. And naturally, they constantly have to think and explore. To figure out what kind of person they could be. Now, it's true that our brain has a very high capacity for adaptation. In fact, even in those primitive ages, our ability to adapt allowed us to survive for generations, but there's no need to push it this far. Because the brain wants to learn to know and to put what it knows into practice. It feels safe when it knows. Now, people like this, for example, the profiles you mentioned, probably can't even sleep comfortably at night. In other words, they probably can't get quality sleep. They might be waking up frequently, for example. But I think there might also be an underlying fear of loneliness here. Anxiety, fear of exclusion, or not being accepted could also be underlying factors. But of course, we should address this in a separate video because their mind is constantly thinking, trying to adapt. The person will try to discover and then create a profile accordingly. It's probably because of these reasons. So even when they smile, it's not really them. When they try to laugh out loud, it's not really them. Of course, we all do these things as behaviors, but only at the micro expression level. We give ourselves away. We might reveal that we're not being ourselves, or it's not really sustainable anyway. These are decisive things for us.
How long can it go on like this? Yes. These people say, I don't know what I want. Is this a sign of burnout?
Of course, it's a sign of burnout. In fact, this question actually shows us something. How often do they do this in their life? How intensely do they use this? So, what does it mean to not be oneself? How far are they moving away from being themselves? Are they like this everywhere, or is it just at work? Are they like this in their social environment too? If someone says, I don't know what would make me happy, what do they want? If someone says, I don't know what I want from life, it means they frequently use this strategy, adapting to every environment or displaying behaviors suitable for that place at the expense of distancing themselves from who they really are. By the way, we see this a lot in people who are afraid of not being accepted. We see this a lot in people who are afraid of being rejected, not being accepted, or being excluded.
Is it maybe also about not being able to belong to a group? So do you feel this way when you can't belong?
They think they can't belong, but actually they can. Everyone can be part of a social circle. They just need to meet more people or socialize more in those social circles. We are social beings. We only experience it on the level of anxiety, that feeling of not being able to belong there. They experience the anxiety of being rejected or excluded.
There is a reason, a basis for this fear as well.
For example, the psychosocial development theory explains this in the stages of psychosocial development.
So, is becoming emotionally numb also a part of this?
Yes, because the more you distance yourself from yourself, okay? The more you distance yourself from yourself, after a while, you don't even know what you're supposed to feel. Like, should I be happy? Should I be sad? And naturally, you start to become numb. Actually, that part is a clear sign that you're experiencing a kind of mental confusion. In other words, mental fog. You can't decide what's right or wrong. You've lost your ability to reason. This is something that needs to be addressed.
So what should we do? When we realize we've lost ourselves, where should we start?
Where should we start? First of all, we need to turn inward, of course. What do I want? Why am I like this? Now, these 3 questions you're asking are really good. By the way, these are 3 signs. Not knowing what you want, for example. How does this happen? We've also explained the underlying reason. Right here. We've also explained the anxiety. Secondly, not knowing what you want. Thirdly, becoming numb. Becoming numb is the worst level of this. At that point, the person no longer feels like they belong to their own life. This from a neuropsychological perspective. If I were to explain its effects, simply put, our anxiety level is very high. Because if we've become distant from ourselves, Look, what was the person's anxiety again? To belong to a group. So what happened in the end? They even started lying to themselves. They ended up excluding themselves as well. That's why, especially at this point, one should turn inward as soon as possible and discover themselves. What do I like? What do I do? By the way, trial and error methods usually have a positive effect here. It's necessary to explore. In other words, we need to rediscover ourselves. Of course, for people with high anxiety here, they need strong motivation to be able to decide to turn inward and make such a change. And that point is usually when they become numb. After that point, you really do need to turn toward yourself. Actually, that's the purpose of making these videos. Don't wait until you reach the third level, the third sign. So even when answering the very first question, take a look at how much you're trying to adapt yourself to your environment. How much is this distancing you from yourself? Being able to intervene at that stage is actually one of the main goals of our channel. In other words, we're trying to reach you through these videos. Now, when a person feels alienated from themselves, this becomes a major source of anxiety. Naturally, we need to turn back to ourselves. In other words, we need to discover ourselves, simply put. Try things out. Like, I don't know, would I enjoy going to different courses? Would I enjoy walking? Do I like rainy weather more? Or do I prefer sunny weather? If you haven't gone out and done something or taken a walk in the rain, you can't really know, can you?
It's that simple. You can even start with something as basic as milk. Do I like coffee?
More or tea? Exactly. You try it. You discover it. So the results you get from experience, for example, I've never had coffee in my life. I don't like coffee. That's a prejudice. But I tried coffee. Black coffee. I didn't like it. I added sugar. Still didn't like it. Then I tried it with milk. I had a latte. I thought, meh. I said, cappuccino is nice. So you become more aware of yourself in this regard, don't you? I don't like black coffee or black coffee with sugar. I like cappuccino. That's discovering yourself. Just a simple example.
So, losing yourself, drifting away from yourself without realizing it.
Yes. And it creates a lot of anxiety.
But here's the beautiful part. No matter how far you drift away, just one step is enough to return to yourself. Yes.
That's the nice part about it. So you need to change your perspective. That
It all starts with becoming aware in that step, as we said. If you found yourself in this video, maybe it's time to stop and listen to your own voice.
By the way, we already have to find balance, you see. Of course, we will adapt to our environment, but that doesn't mean giving up on ourselves. Sometimes we might do things we don't want to do, but we should always return to our essence. A role, we're not on a theater stage, we're living life as ourselves. All right? Pay attention to this. Your comments are important to us.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a comment, and like the video. Yes, thank you.
See you in the next video.